Our scripture reading this morning comes from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 16, verses 1 through 13. This has been called by many a very puzzling parable. Challenging, perplexing, and one no one wants to preach on. So listen and see if you can figure out why. Jesus also said to the disciples, "A certain rich man heard that his household manager was wasting his estate. He called the manager in and said to him, 'What is this I hear about you? Give me a report of your administration, because you can no longer serve as my manager.' Manager thought, 'I'm not strong enough to dig and too proud to beg. I know what I'll do, so that when I'm removed from my management position, people will welcome me into their houses.' One by one, the manager sent for each person who owed his master money. He said to the first, 'How much do you owe my master?' He said, 900 gallons of olive oil. The manager said to him, 'Take your contract, sit down quickly and write 450 gallons. Then the manager said to another, 'How much do you owe?' He said, 1,000 bushels of wheat. He said, 'Take your contract and write 800. The master commended the dishonest manager because he acted so cleverly. People who belong to this world are more clever in dealing with their peers than are people who belong to the light. I tell you, use worldly wealth to make friends for yourself, so that when it's gone, you will be welcomed into the eternal homes. Whoever is faithful with little is also faithful with much, and the one who is dishonest with little is also dishonest with much. If you haven't been faithful with worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? If you haven't been faithful with someone else's property, who will give you your own? No household servant can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be loyal to the one and have contempt for the other. You cannot serve God and wealth." I want to begin this morning's reflection with a little story. Not everyone my age is fortunate enough to have a mother. I'm 79 and my stepmother is approaching 96. If there were a movie portraying the classic Down East matriarch, she could do it without a script. Fiercely independent, smart with money, friendly, compassionate, all done with a rather strong Down East accent. No R's at the end of some words. Yet, one of her strengths that she doesn't realize is the ability to hit the nail on the head and put things into perspective. This week, I told her I was working on writing this reflection, and she said, "Oh, you must be learning a lot." And I said, "Oh, yes, I am." Then I stopped and I said, "About what?" "God, isn't that what you're supposed to be learning about?" That put it into perspective for me, and I worked a bit harder. So I read you this parable, and the disciples were wandering around and saying, what is he talking about? Is he saying that we should praise somebody who is corrupt, who is opportunistic? If you take it out of context, it looks like Jesus actually is praising him, but not for what you may think. not for cooking the books, but as Dina said, for playing the game with the rules he had. So let's take a brief moment and look at words. I have to start back in the Old Testament because it came as such a surprise to me. If I said the word Pharaoh to you, what would you immediately think? Anybody? Egyptian leader. Perfect, that's what I thought. Pharaoh refers to the political and religious governing framework of ancient Egypt. So instead of going through all that, when they talk about it, they just say Pharaoh. The Pharaoh was seen as both the king and a divine figure, embodying the state and the governance. Centralized authority, elaborate bureaucracy, and a belief in the Pharaoh's divine right to rule, influencing every aspect of Egyptian life, from agriculture to the monumental architecture. Oh, Fred, you're going to give me one this time. Empire. Anybody? I always thought empire was the Roman Empire. In biblical context, it refers to a large political union of state, usually under a single sovereign authority, that extends its dominion over diverse people and territories. You had the Egyptian Empire, you had the Assyrian Empire, you had the Babylonian Empire, the Persian Empire, and now, here we are in Jesus' time, the Roman Empire. It serves as both a historical reality and a symbolic representation of the spiritual battle between God's kingdom and the kingdoms of the world. Now, here's one, mammon. And it's the last one I'm doing. A brief definition of the word mammon from Ann Camere at study.com says that mammon is a Judeo-Christian term meaning money, material wealth, avarice, or riches. It has also been personified as a false god or money demon who is worshipped for the desire to gain wealth. Martin Luther called mammon the most common god on earth. If you read verses 9 and 11 of today's gospel reading from the King James Version, you will hear the term unrighteous mammon rather than the term wealth, which we find in most of our biblical translations. Barbara Rosing, Reverend Doctor, Professor Emeritus of New Testament at Lutheran School of Chicago, Lutheran School of Theology at Chicago, writes in her commentary for this Sunday that to understand the parable, we need a mini course on the economics of Roman-occupied Galilee in the first century. Rich landlords and rulers were loan sharks, using exorbitant interest rates to amass more land so they could disinherit the peasants of their family land in direct violation of biblical covenantal law of that time. The rich man or lord in verses 3 and 6, along with his steward or debt collector, were both exploiting desperate peasants. So, okay, let's think of the parable. You've got the rich man, and you have his business manager. Now, even though his business manager came up with this brilliant plan that would protect himself, and the landlord commended him for it, he didn't give him his job back. He was still fired. Okay, this is like watching a bad movie with no likable character in it. Is Jesus trying to persuade us that the business manager is more deserving because he reduced the debts owed to his master? Well, that was thoughtful of him, wasn't it? He came up with this idea looking for a way to come out on top. No hard labor, no begging. Just a nice guy being taken care of by those who owed him a debt of gratitude. During my research for this reflection, I came across a sermon written by Reverend Nathan Nettleton from Down Under. He's the pastor of the South Yarrow Community Baptist Church in Melbourne, Australia. Now you're thinking, oh boy, this is going to be conservative. No. The 8-word description of his church is an open table where love knows no border. So, a little bit ahead of myself. Nathan Nettleton also writes for a website called laughingbird.net. Kookaburra, isn't that the Australian word for laughing bird? Yeah. He writes and he manages this. It's a liturgical resource site. Now, we used it in the past, and I had no idea about Pastor Nathan. So I happened to find out some things that he said about Jesus and parables in general, and this parable specifically. Jesus did not use parables because he didn't have a proper theological education, and therefore the point of preaching on them is not just to turn them back into clear moral rules. Parables are more often snapshots of real life with all the ambiguities and uncertainties of real life, and with all the surprises and ironic twists in which some people live. Consistently, now wait a minute. Jesus did not seek to portray an ideal fantasy world in which some person lives consistently by sound, moral, godly principles, and everyone else is the villain. So he really wasn't saying that the manager was more godly than the merchant. He was more interested in how the world actually is and enabling us to observe it and learn from it in all its messiness and confusion. So that was the world in which those people lived. There's also a reference to children of the light and children of darkness. Children of the light at the time were the believers. Children of darkness, the unbelievers. It's not really a case of good and evil. Jesus sadly acknowledges that the people of God don't always seem to be as savvy as those who are driven by self-interest. Now, that doesn't mean we should be driven by self-interest. He's not being praised for his duplicitous methods to protect himself, but for his ingenuity to come up with a plan. Christians are often thought to be naive to the ways of the world, do-gooders who don't understand how the world really works, politically, socially, economically, and perhaps morally. Does that mean we should initiate life and business practices that flaunt moral turpitude? I had to look that one up. What could it mean? Pastor Nathan again. If, meaning the parable, is saying, if even those who are motivated only by money and status and looking after number one are this cunning in the way they operate, how much more should those of us who are committed to a greater cause and motivated by the Spirit of God be willing and able to make wise and creative use of our energy, time, resources, and imagination in the service of the cause of justice and right in the world. Dina said something last week that brought me back to Dr. Marisa Laviola, our conference minister. Dina said, I want this church to be recognized as important in this community, that we're here for a purpose, and that people see us for that reason. Way back when Marisa became the conference minister, in her opening address, she talked about the importance of the church, any church, small church, to the local community. So the question is, would Presque Isle miss the Presque Isle Congregational Church if we had to close? How far is our outreach? Careful planning for the use of our limited resources to reach the most vulnerable could be a wise church strategy to ensure that we are making a difference locally. Here's a bit of trivia for you. The name of our church, the Presque Isle Congregational Church, United Church of Christ, means we are a congregational church which reflects the way our church is run, governed by the congregation, by you, by all of us, through the church council and the ministries like property and finance, worship, children, welcome and care. We govern ourselves and we own our property. We are independent. We are also a member of the greater church, the mainline Protestant church, United Church of Christ. When churches vote to join this body, the UCC, the congregations voting accept that the UCC is a justice-minded church, which is willing to take political stands against injustice, whether social, ecological, financial, or any other type of injustice that affects people. Where do we, right here in Presque Isle, Maine, fit into this picture? Are we naive children of light? Do we understand what Jesus was trying to tell us then and now? How many of you play cards or play games? Dina hit this morning, so I realized I was coming close to being right. Do you know the rules of each and every game, backwards and forwards, inside and out? Do you use those rules and their nuances to your advantage to win? We need to find a game, learn the rules, and win for those we call our neighbors. We have to know how to play in the real world, how to do what matters. I can't possibly end this as well as Nathan Nettleton did, so I think you're going to have to listen to it. It's a tough world that we live in. Those who don't have the toughness to cope in it often don't survive. If we are for real about committing ourselves to the struggle for a new age, an age of justice and peace and freedom for all, then we had better be tough enough to mix it up with those who oppose those things and who stop at nothing to get their way. There is nothing admirable about being too holy or too wimpy to get blood on our hands and therefore letting the world just go on the way it is and never taking a stand. We follow the Christ who was tough enough to take the blows of the cross when he knew that copping to the injustice would in that situation break its power, and tough enough to not shy away from a messy, morally ambiguous story like this one. And if we are to be followers of this Christ, and we want him to be with us when we are confronting the raging storms of an angry world, then we'd better be tough enough to use our time, energy, resources, and creative imagination to tackle all that stands in the way of the fullness of life that he has called us to champion. We need to learn the rules of the game and play it wisely. I'm going to leave you with the chorus of Bob Dylan's 1979 song, Gotta Have Somebody, Gotta Serve Somebody. Almost missed that. Gotta serve somebody. I never heard it, but boy, didn't it hit. But you're going to have to serve somebody. Yes, indeed. You're going to have to serve somebody, whether it be the devil or it may be the Lord, but you're going to have to serve somebody. May it be the Christ who leads us. Thank you.